911 for what city?
Please, Calgary, I'm freezing. Please. My car was stuck. They just picked me up and just dropped me off somewhere.
Who dropped you off?
The police dropped me off here. They just dropped me off here? Like, really? This is what you guys call Canada? Just because I sound black doesn't mean I'm bad.
No one said you're bad because you're black, okay? No one ever said that.
No, that's what it is.
Well, that's not the situation, okay? There's no racial undertones here.
I'm not a bad guy. I don't have anything to do with the cops. They just picked me up and dropped me off somewhere cold.
Please
They just left me here. Like,
stop shouting.
okay, I'm not shouting. I'm just freezing. I'm cold.
I know. So
I need help. Please, I need help.
We live in a world where in too many places, police services, police forces have lost the trust of the communities that they serve. We've seen that in other places in Canada, we've seen it in other places in the Western world. It's not something we want to see here, nor is it something we will see here. The Calgary Police Service is quite possibly one of the best, if not the best, police services in this country, which makes it one of the very best in the world.
Taking that oath of allegiance, becoming a police officer provides you with an enormous amount of authority. Probably the most intimate form of government the public will ever deal with is the police. The fact that they could suspend your Charter of Rights and Freedoms, they could use force against you, they can do things to you that could forever upend your life, your family's life, comes with a high, specific need to be accountable.
The fact is that right now, our front line is responding far too frequently to situations which forces them to make life and death decisions. The training we receive is some of the best in Canada, and when faced with these critical decisions, our officers will fall back upon that training. They react exactly as all police training dictates when lives are in danger.
This year alone, at least 9 former and current officers are facing criminal charges. Among them, assault with a weapon, bribery of an officer, breach of trust, improperly storing a weapon, and these are only the ones we know about.
Put that in.
You have a culture of people who are used to being authoritarian. They're used to being right at all times. They're used to sort of living the traditional values. I'm the boss, you're not, therefore it's okay for me to yell at you and treat you like that. That is inherent in our decades of culture, those kind of norms and roles and behaviors.
Once I started reporting on certain issues within the Calgary Police Service, then it's almost like sort of the floodgates open and people come to you with information that they have, thinking that you might have the connections or the expertise to start looking in, investigating, tackling some of the issues. Police announced that 3 of their own are being charged in an excessive force case against a man named Clayton Prince, who they had tried to conduct a traffic stop on. He had run away from them.
Hey! I mean, I had been involved in calls where if the offender ran, and it would be like a thing where you would make a group decision. If that guy runs, you give him some extra punches so that he's not gonna screw with the cops again.
3 Calgary police officers are facing a range of criminal charges after a violent arrest this summer. It left a 34-year-old Calgary man with broken bones and a collapsed lung, and it was all caught on video.
Native male, black sweatshirt, blue jeans.
The incident had only come to light, had only been investigated once this dash cam footage surfaced. You can see Clayton Prince run sort of across a front lawn and get down on his stomach with his hands behind his head. We watch as Othen lands on the back of Clayton Prince and begins to punch him in the head. And then the video just cuts out. That had to have been done manually. He had broken some ribs, he had had a collapsed lung, he had had a key shoved into his neck.
All right. Now, what you saw here did not happen.
That's okay. Yeah, I know.
Guys decide to dismiss street justice.
Yeah.
If that guy in the white van was videotaping this could not be very well.
Yeah.
Because when he is surrendering, he's getting down on the ground and he gets fed a whole bunch of chit chat. Right?
That's something where, as a recruit, you think they're going to call their officer coach out and say, hey, that's excessive force. No, they're going to follow what they do and then carry that on throughout their career.
We got her back at.
The officers are charged with assault, but it's the public mischief charge that is most disturbing to Alberta's police watchdog.
The fact that they lied, to suggest that a person committed an offense that they did not commit and potentially subject that person to the criminal justice process and potentially imprisonment is extremely serious.
So the 3 officers charged, in the end, the judge said in her decision she didn't necessarily believe their testimony, but she was left in reasonable doubt. And so 2 of them were acquitted. James Othen was found guilty. He's appealing his convictions.
The issues were discussed in court, so I mean, they bear their own responsibilities for the behaviors. But I look at it from the chief and say, how many times did a supervisor see that behavior? How many times did a manager or a peer see that kind of evolving behavior and said nothing or did nothing or maybe laughed at it or walked away?
I worked around a lot of people that would use excessive force, and I'm ashamed to say I never stood up and said anything, but I was nothing short of afraid. I was afraid that, I mean, number one, I already was a female, so I had that going against me, but now a female who speaks out. I had also seen what happens to people who speak out against those who are heavy-handed, who use too much force. And so I didn't say anything when I saw incidents like that happen. It's common, and I think it still is common, because who are you going to believe? Someone in uniform who's trusted and instilled with this level of respect and trust to serve the public, or are you going to trust a low-life criminal that they're saying, oh yeah, I was beat up?
Man, it was nice. Life was great when I came here. Like, there's so many opportunities, you know, there's jobs. Life was good before the whole incident. I knew where I was going. I knew what I was doing with my life. But then After the incident, everything just kind of went downhill. This Calgary police van pulled behind the car. They came out, told us to push the car. So I told him, hey, look, we tried to push the car. If you can't help us in any way, just leave us alone. To my surprise, they wrestled me to the ground. They put handcuffs on me, put me in the back of the police van. I was just like, what are you guys doing? Like, I haven't done anything wrong, so where are you guys taking me? They just kept on driving. They got to East Village, they stopped there. They took my handcuffs off and they told me to beat it. So they just got in the van and just drove off. So I'm stuck at this location. I don't know where I'm at. I'm from Africa. Where I'm from, you don't see none of this minus 25, minus 30. We don't see none of that. I was just wearing like a tracksuit. I didn't have gloves or no toque or anything. There's no buildings I can go stay warm. I'm scared. Like, I was panicking. I was feared for my life. And it was all construction everywhere. Like cranes up here. I couldn't call a taxi at that time because my phone was dead, but I had a friend's phone that he had dropped when I went to go pick them up. My only option was to call 911.
Calgary Police, what's the address of your emergency?
Okay, Calgary cops picked me up for no reason, just left me here.
Left you where?
I don't know. They just left me here.
He told me it's only for emergency service. So they hanged up on me and I called again. They kept me on the phone for like 10 minutes. And the cop arrived like right here.
Come out with this male. Looks like he's yelling at one of our call takers, so we can disconnect with him.
He walked all across to where I was. Told me to stop fucking calling 911, asking for help and stuff, making complaints.
They took my ID, everything.
He just came on me like in an aggressive way, you know? He pushed me, I got up, tried to run away from him. He tasered me so quick. He put handcuffs on me, and I just remember this guy just beating me up, punching me in the face, knees to the back. This is where he almost ended my life, right here. It's not over there and it's not over there. It's like right here, on this spot right here.
I'm here to provide a brief statement and answer whatever questions I can. At approximately 3 p.m. today, officers responded to a call from staff at a hotel for reports of a man behaving strangely. They took action to enter his room. The situation escalated, and as a result of his actions, a service firearm was discharged. Following standard procedures in an officer-involved shooting, the investigation is now being conducted by the Alberta Serious Incident Response Team, also known as ACERT.
The crux of our investigation is going to focus on what happened and why they needed to gain entry and what occurred in that hotel room.
Something I'll never forget is the door being knocked on with just immense pressure, almost shaking the house. And then open the door and to find that there's 2 officers.
I heard my phone ring. I saw it was Grant, and so I called him back. And he answered the phone, And he was just yelling, "Is mom there? Is mom there?"
It was 3:30 in the morning or so. And I ran to the door, and it's Natalie, and she can hardly... she can hardly breathe.
And she was yelling out that Anthony is dead, that they've killed Anthony.
Bells toll for Anthony Heffernan. The 27-year-old was remembered at his funeral Wednesday in Prince Albert. He was shot and killed by Calgary police last week.
He was taken down with 3 shots to the head and 1 to the chest. And we want to know why.
Once we had the funeral and went back into Saskatchewan, we phoned AIDSERT numerous times, and the lead investigator talked to us at length.
You do know what did Anthony do to make him such a threat to the police, 5 police officers, that they had to kill him?
What we've been told is that he presented himself with a syringe and he motioned towards the officers. That's my understanding of it.
5 officers, and they would kill a person because he had a needle and lighter?
I don't make an opinion whether or not the members acted appropriately. Our role is to compile the facts.
Do you know if any other police officers had their guns drawn?
Some do, yes.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah.
They're going in for a wellness check with guns drawn?
Not all of them have guns drawn. Some do.
Ooh. Were they surrounding him, or what were they doing?
Well, and again, Pat, that will be what are they trained to do?
God, and I really hope this doesn't happen to someone else. And how this is handled. I mean, holy Lord.
The Heffernan family brought their concerns to me, and I agreed to represent them. Anthony Heffernan winds up in a hotel room, he's using drugs, and he overstayed his rental, wasn't answering the phone, wasn't answering the knocking of the door. So the hotel management, obviously being concerned about his welfare, phoned the Calgary Police Service. Bad move. Bad move.
Want to make sure that people are safe. There's nothing bad in there, and obviously they need to check out as well. So they're due to check out at 11 o'clock.
So they're 2.5 hours overdue here. Okay.
They force entry to the room. There's lots of yelling. They get close to him. 2 tasers were used.
3030, Barlow Trail Northeast. Why do I think I put a call up here? This is the hotel? Yep. Room 414. He's got a male with a gunshot wound.
The sergeant and 3 other officers obviously did not see the need to use lethal force. Some constable, who we know to be McLaughlin, decided on his own to kill him.
Once we found out what AIDSERT is, and like it's cops kind of investigating cops, and we're like, well, who has our back kind of thing.
Tom Engel with the Criminal Trial Lawyers Association is demanding more civilian oversight. He says investigating police is not good enough.
They seem to be very sympathetic to the police officers and seem to accept their stories without critical analysis or investigation.
I am stunned to hear that comment.
Susan Hewson was emotional and defensive Thursday. The ACERT director says criticism the serious incident response team is biased toward police is unfair.
We are concerned that everybody gets fair treatment in this province. No one is above the law.
The more details we got, the angrier we kind of became. For these 5 officers to say that they fear for their lives is complete bullshit. There's no way 5 of them couldn't handle Anthony that day with no weapon.
They put me in the police van, read me my rights, and said I was being charged for assaulting a police officer. At that time, I didn't really have much to say to them. Like, I was just so weak and like so broken down, you know, like just in so much pain. They finally took me out. I got on the train. I'm all bruised up, you know, lips busted up. I'm bleeding, and people are just looking at me like, what happened to you, you know? I called my friend. As soon as he walked in, he's like, holy shit, what happened to you, man? We went to the hospital, and when we got there, I was in so much pain, I could barely stand. I stayed at my friend's house for like almost a week because I was scared to come home because they knew where I lived. I was having like flashbacks, and you know, the images just keeps repeating itself in my head, you know, so I was just terrified, man. I didn't want to go home, you know. I didn't want to be alone, I guess. I was like, man, I gotta do something about this, you know? I can't just let them get away with this. I filed a complaint because I felt like I had to do something about it before it happens to someone again.
Growing up on acreage was so much fun. There's always something to do outside. We had a big family, and I've always loved that about our family. It was just chaos always. Anthony is just 3 years younger than me, and our birthdays are just a week apart. We shared our birthdays every year together, and he ended up being my best friend up until his death 4 years ago now.
Anthony was always laughing, extremely caring, and very generous. He was an electrician. It was a really great career for him. But I think also having a lot of access to so much money at such a young age, you know, he kind of fell into spending it in the best ways often, so.
With Anthony and drugs, unfortunately, specifically cocaine, he had a problem with it.
He hated his addiction, and to be honest, he lived a very sober life for the couple years before he died. He relapsed, you know, going into the hotel room. The reaction from people, well, he was an addict and, he kind of deserved it, or, he's the one who put himself there. If he wasn't there, it wouldn't have happened, We didn't want the story for Anthony that there was an addict who was killed. I mean, he was our brother and he died in a way that he shouldn't have died. And if we were going to take anything to try to make the world better, we had to have a voice for him.
Truth and justice for Anthony. Truth and justice for Anthony. Truth and justice for Anthony. Truth and justice for Anthony.
Yeah, 10-4.
It was very scary for a while. They know our faces, they know our names, they know where we live. That was definitely really hard. And yeah, there was a lot of police at the march. I wish I could say that they had a lot of empathetic faces, but it wasn't like that. And yeah, they were filming.
12:10. Approximately 80 people.
We do not have a just society if police can come to a wellness check, kick in a door, taser, and shoot an unarmed man 4 times, once in the chest, and 3 times in the head. Anthony was not a threat to anyone. This must never happen again in Calgary or Canada.
We thought that by us being vocal, we would possibly stop an officer from pulling the trigger again. If anything can come good out of this with Anthony's death and this huge hole in our hearts, is that another family won't have to experience what we went through. And it didn't.
At first, I thought they were going to drop the charge because I didn't do nothing and they don't have no evidence against me. But then after like a year or so, I spoke to my lawyer. She's like, yeah, this is going to go to trial, so get ready.
The only basis by which Godfred was charged with assault was that there was some sort of gesture. There was never any allegation that he'd actually hit anybody or pushed anybody or had any physical contact. Of course, I've heard before stories from people who have been charged with assaulting a police officer and have said that they, in fact, were the ones assaulted, so it wasn't anything new to me, but his demeanor really drew my attention. He kept saying, it's a construction site, there's got to have been some video there, somebody had to have a camera there, you've got to get the cameras and show what happened to me. And so that was really remarkable for me. Why would he be encouraging me to try and get evidence of what he was telling me if he were making something up? So we're back in courtroom 1008. This is the very courtroom where Godfred was prosecuted. The day of the trial, I felt scared for Godfred. 3 uniformed police officers standing up under oath and telling their version of events, and Godfred standing on his own. I didn't feel confident, and I felt scared for him. The trial commenced with Constable Denockley. He conceded that he had thrown Godfred to the ground. That event ended with Denockley putting Godfred into a police vehicle and then, for no logical reason, drove away from that scene and just left him off on a street corner wearing a little sweat jacket and a pair of sweatpants. This was -28 in frigid Calgary weather, and he just left him there with no regard at all for his safety.
guns out, members just holding a guy on the ground.
Looking at the video, I see Godfred handcuffed. The police officers are dragging him along, and he kind of falls, or maybe he is trying to stand up, but ultimately he falls to his back. And then we see the police officer punching him in the head. It looks like he's kneeling on one knee and striking him with his other knee repeatedly around the head and chest and upper body area. And there is no possibility that Godfred is in any way resisting or attacking. He's on the ground, on his back, with his hands cuffed, pulled up above his head, and there is no escape. There is no escape for that kid.
Okay, Yukon, 3 members out now, so anyone else coming can slow down.
The final officer that was involved was Constable Curtis, and he ultimately took Godfred into custody. I asked him what it was that made him believe that Godfred was intoxicated, and he said 2 things. One is that the other officers had told him that Godfred was intoxicated, and that Godfred repeated the phrase, "I don't deserve this." And that was what led him to believe that Godfred was intoxicated. And that leads to a bigger concern about this entire case. We didn't have 3 evil officers who were conspiring one with the other to get this man in trouble. We had 3 independent actors, one of whom kidnapped Godfred and took him and left him to freeze to death. Another one who found him there, having called for help, and beat him up such that he still hasn't physically recovered years later. And a third who just blindly accepted this must be a drunk man because the others said so. That, in my view, is a critical difficulty with the police service, is that that could possibly happen. It's very frightening. Judge McElhargy found that the police officers were not credible and was not able to find in any way that Godfred assaulted the police officer, and Godfred was acquitted.
Beat 150. Sorry, beat 158, we're out.
Like with all this evidence, with all these videos and everything, they still went on with the trial and they actually tried to lock me up for doing nothing.
Trevor, do you need EMS? Negative, but the back arrow.
It makes me feel like he's like profiling me, you know? Like, you just did this to me. Who is the bad guy? The guy who puts an innocent guy in handcuffs, taser him, beat him up for no reason? Or the guy that needed help and got tortured? Who's the bad guy?
All units, all channels. The code 200 in one district involving unit 1146 has been resolved.
Had we not had a video recording, we would have had Godfred standing up in court and saying, the police officers are lying. And I can't imagine any judge going out on a limb and saying, you're right, the 3 of them are lying. It's you that's telling the truth. That would have been a very hard sell for Godfred.
Yes, he was a beautiful baby. The thing is, you know, he brought a lot of joy to our lives and a ton of laughter.
Yeah.
This is under the trampoline one day.
Yeah.
They had
spent a lot of time under the trampoline in the summer because it was a cooler spot where they talk and visit and have picnics sometimes. Yeah. Trampoline is a very important part of their life.
And then this is Joe and Sue's wedding.
So that's 6 weeks before he was killed. Yeah. Yeah, so that's our last total family picture. Had family pictures since, but there's always someone missed. Yeah, so with a parent, it's a terrible thing to lose a child. Yeah, and in our case, it's a little bit more difficult, just for how he died, it's senselessness.
Just before 5 p.m., police tactical teams descended onto this residential neighborhood, an active shooter in one of the homes. Heavily armed officers on the ground moved in to take on the shooter. Police shot and killed the suspect.
I had started to get information that the same officer who was involved in Anthony Heffernan's death had also wound up at another officer-involved shooting, and not just been involved, but had drawn his weapon and had fired his gun.
David McQueen was in a wheelchair and had recently lost his in-home care because it could no longer afford it. He struggled for compensation from the government and became increasingly angry and desperate. It all came to a head in an armed standoff. He was shot and killed by police after he reportedly fired several shots into the street, hitting a city bus.
I don't think he wanted to die. I think he just wanted to be heard more, and this was the only way he knew to get people's attention.
I called Grant Heffernan, and I remember saying, I think I'm going to tell you some information you don't know, and I think it's going to be upsetting to you. Are you okay to hear this from me?
She told me that the same officer that killed Anthony was back to work and was also involved in another shooting that killed McQueen. And that was the craziest. I just couldn't believe it. You know what I mean? Like, is that just the mentality of the Calgary Police? Like, they don't care at all. Like, put him back to work. He's fine. That Mr. Anthony Heffernan deserved it.
I think there was an understanding that this officer is under investigation. He's not going to be suspended without pay. He's not even going to be suspended. But maybe he shouldn't have been on the street. Maybe he should have been given administrative duties until he was cleared from the Heffernan shooting.
Godfred's therapy, his legal fees, there is no compensation. He's intended to just feel fortunate that he's been found not guilty and move on.
I went through like 5, 6 lawyers in Calgary. Nobody was willing to take on the case. My defense lawyer, she referred me to a lawyer in Edmonton, Tom Engel.
It was a travesty that he was ever arrested, ever charged. Once the charge is laid, it goes to the Calgary Crown, and they have to thoroughly review all of the evidence. Now they have to decide whether they have a reasonable likelihood of conviction, and if they do, whether it's in the public interest to prosecute Godfred. Looking at this whole scenario, is it in the public interest to prosecute this man? The answer to me would be clearly no. There's a failure there. These checks and balances, none of them worked.
A prosecutor's job is to seek justice, always, and that's their only job. So to look at a video recording like that and feel that justice is best served by this young man who was clearly beaten severely by the police, to see that justice would be served by having that person prosecuted for having gestured at the very most to a police officer in an assaultive way, that's not the job in my view. Prosecutors have a responsibility to make sure that those officers who are not acting within the bounds of the law are taken to task. And essentially when a judge says, I don't think the police officers were telling the truth, it just shouldn't sit there. It shouldn't just sit there without any follow-up. But I have no reason to think that's not exactly what happened.
Crown prosecutors generally don't like to report police officers' misconduct. I got confirmation that the Crown prosecutor in Godfred's case did not report it. But I have tried for years to get the Alberta Crown Prosecution Service and the Federal Prosecution Service to adopt a policy that will require their prosecutors to report this conduct, and they have resisted. So it's very strange to me that the Crown Prosecution Service would not be rushing to implement such a policy. I mean, after all, aren't they interested in a justice system where the police officers are the best that they could be?
I was living with my girlfriend, but I couldn't work due to my back injuries and stuff. And bills is piling up and piling up and piling up, and she's paying the bills and I'm just sitting at home. After me and my girl broke up, I was homeless. I had to put my stuff in the storage. 6 months, sleeping on my friend's couch in the basement. I went through all that back pain and the stress. The stress makes the pain even worse, you know?
When I first met Godfred, he hadn't a permanent home and was very lonely, very disenfranchised. It was evidence that he had severe PTSD. He was highly symptomatic and just not able to mobilize at all. And he was also in a lot of physical pain. His back was very sore. He was still recovering from his injuries. He was in a bad place. His trauma was profound. He was having nightmares. He was having flashbacks. He was really afraid of the police. As time goes on, it tends to get better, but his trauma is very severe.
Them kidnapping me and dropping me off somewhere in the cold, it's not the first time they've done that. Like, they've done it so many times to the Aboriginal people. They have a name for that. It's called the Starlight Tour. This has been going on for years.
History is fraught with those situations where some very bad things have happened to people because the police have thrown them out of vehicles or left them to freeze at night or left them abandoned on deserted roads or something. I mean, that's not our role, it's not our job. It's highly offensive to our oath of allegiance, it's highly offensive to our role. It is the antithesis of professional policing.
I think any Calgarian would be very disturbed about this kind of misconduct and the fact that these officers are still working. As far as I know, they're still out in the field. Let's remember that Godfred is black. Let's not lose sight of that.
I think that there's a racial issue here. I think that there's a bully factor here. But I can guarantee you, if my son was in that BMW X5, it would have been a completely different outcome. And that really bugs me. Or for white girls. They would have been taking them out for coffee.
At the ACERT meeting, we recorded the proceedings that took place, and almost immediately after we get in, Susan Houston tells us she's made the decision that she is going to send the file to the prosecution. And that's when we were informed there was actually 6 times that the head shot, and that they didn't see the justification for him for shooting Anthony.
What I will say to the Crown is I believe there are reasonable grounds to believe an offense has been committed. And I think you need to look at second-degree murder, manslaughter, and criminal negligence. And I've said to her that before she makes any decisions, there's certain things she should do, like she has to go to that hotel room.
And what's her name?
Carrie Ann Downey.
Okay.
She's got the courage of her conviction, so she can make that call.
That's great.
Which is what I want. I want a prosecutor, because we get a lot of no likelihood of conviction. I want somebody who's not going to go, no judges convict, so I'm not going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
After our meeting with Susan Houston, we were very hopeful with it, even though she said that, again, it would have to go, to the prosecution, but we were naturally very hopeful.
I'd like to thank everybody for coming today. This has been an incredibly difficult case, and it's been one of the most difficult cases that ACERT has had to deal with while I've been executive director. I noticed the Heffernans are here. Anthony Heffernan was 27 years old at the time that he was shot and killed. The conclusion was that based on my review of all of the evidence, that there was evidence capable of constituting reasonable grounds to believe an offense or offenses had been committed under the criminal code. As is required under the Police Act, ACERT must forward their investigation to the Crown in those circumstances, and we did so.
ACERT had recommended charges to the Crown's office, and so I think people were expecting that this might be one of those rare cases where charges were going to be laid against the officer.
Carrie Ann Downey was the prosecutor to look at the file, and we don't know if she was taken off it or what took place, but all of a sudden, the Deputy Minister of Justice was there, and he is the head prosecutor of all the prosecutors in Alberta. And we don't know why he was there. Our understanding is that it's never taken place before.
Following a thorough review of the evidence, a close analysis of the relevant law, the application of the standard for commencing prosecutions, it's our determination that there will not be a prosecution in this case. Ultimately, there was simply not sufficient evidence that the officer's use of force was unjustified. And as such, in these circumstances, there's not a reasonable likelihood of conviction resulting from the use of force, and there will not be a prosecution. I want to say to the Heffernan family how sorry I am for your loss.
So Panna went on to say that the officer had no other choices.
In the circumstances that the officer found himself in, there were no reasonable alternatives to taking the steps that he did.
And that naturally is completely wrong. He had lots of choices. It does not make sense. And you wonder, how would a prosecutor ever come out with a statement like that?
I'm completely devastated. We really actually thought in the last 17 months that clear and just thinking would prevail. But it didn't.
And so we were very disheartened, to say the least. Very saddened by the whole ordeal.
I often wonder how they all sleep at night. Maybe just fine. We don't. You know, I often wonder, does McLaughlin have a full night's sleep? Does Eric Kilpannen? Maybe they do.
Just another day in the life of the Calgary Police. Yeah. Another one dead and another one buried, and let's forget about it.
An officer who has been on the force for about a year fired her gun, killing a 27-year-old woman. This is the 10th officer-involved shooting in Calgary this year, 5 of them fatal.
Calgary is often the city that has more officer-involved shootings than any other city in Canada, and I don't know what the reason for that is.
In an ideal world, the prosecution and the police should be separate. But in the real world, the prosecution and the police work very, very close together. Clearly, they're operating above the law.
Our Crown is in Edmonton.
Yeah.
And usually that's enough division. She's not gonna have to work with the Calgary Police Service, but it may be better, and I'm gonna offer her the option of, do you want us to send it out of province?
Our feeling was, obviously, there was information in there that we had that they didn't want us to have or other people to have.
I'm inclined to think I should talk to the Assistant Deputy Minister about it. Because in fairness to Carrie Ann, who's a very courageous prosecutor, like she's the cat's pajamas. But in fairness to her, I just want to make sure something isn't sitting in the back of her head about the fact that she's got to practice for the next 15 years with.
But isn't that the whole problem?
It is, but you know what? I mean, I can tell you, I prosecuted a prosecutor's son in this province. We put that aside. We do.
Okay.
For a former Crown prosecutor to say that, that's kind of an indictment on the system here, isn't it? Because she is suggesting that there are Crowns within Alberta who don't have the courage to do it.
Why should it be different for the police when looking at making the charges than it is for you and me? Why should that be different? Why should it take a courageous prosecutor to bring charges?
A lot of Crowns get the mistaken impression that the police are part of the team. The Crown will say, I have to go talk to my officers. I have to make sure it's good with them. What difference does it make? You're in charge here. It has to be good with you. You can't care about what the police think about this. So make no mistake, there is pressure. And it's not just pressure in whether to prosecute an officer or carry on a prosecution. There is pressure brought to bear in any case where the police conduct is at issue, including cases where the police have brought the charges against a citizen.
I grew up in Ghana, helping my uncle like repair cars and stuff like that. So that kind of got my interest, and came to Canada. I wanted to be a heavy-duty mechanic as well. So I went to school to upgrade. That's what I wanted to do. But after this incident, I had to drop everything because, I mean, how am I going to be a heavy-duty mechanic with back problems, right? Prior to this incident, I didn't have no health issues, you know. I was strong and healthy and I was a go-getter, you know. But after the back injuries and all this stuff, it just kind of slowed me down. I filed a complaint 5 years ago and nothing has been done about it. Every 45 days, they send me a letter saying the investigation is still ongoing. All these officers are still working, you know. Who knows what they're doing out there?
Good afternoon. On Monday, May 25th, 2015, police were called for reports that a man had broken into his ex-girlfriend's residence and stolen a number of items. The man was located nearby and placed under arrest. Officers pulled into the parking lot behind the CPS Court Services section and removed the man from the back of the marked police vehicle. At this time, an altercation took place between one of the officers and the man, resulting in the man being thrown to the ground while handcuffed. He received serious head injuries as a result. The incident was captured on multiple CCTV cameras. The 6-year member of the Calgary Police Service has been charged with aggravated assault. The member is now on administrative leave and their status will be continually reviewed.
So the CPS announced that one of its officers was facing these aggravated assault charges. They give some basic details, but they don't name the officer. A few days later, I was contacted by the brother and sister-in-law of the alleged victim of this officer. And they came to me with this video.
After seeing what had actually happened, I knew that people needed to see it. I knew that what had happened wasn't right. Growing up as a kid with my dad as a cop, they were my heroes. I would see another police officer and he would remind me of my dad. And there was a point where I did think about becoming a police officer. I couldn't believe that someone would be handled so aggressively when they were in handcuffs. No one deserves to have that done to them, whether they're an addict or not.
Daniel came to our office. His understanding was that he was under investigation for an assault of the very officer who ended up being charged. That's not unusual in my area. Typically speaking, that is the charge that people end up leaving with because the police needed justification for applying force. While Daniel was in hospital, they had to drill a hole into his head so that they could relieve the pressure from the injuries to his brain. He had suffered traumatic brain injury and was affecting him going forward.
His memory was affected. He can remember things that you might have told him 5 minutes before. I know it was hard on him when he was going to the rehab places and forgetting that he had meetings and stuff like that.
He was wanting to get some recognition that this was wrong. And ultimately the plan was to sue, but he never made it that far.
And the man arrested, how is he doing with his injuries? He recovered from those injuries, but he has subsequently passed away as a result of unrelated events.
I don't know where that comment about him being fully recovered would have come from. Short-term memory loss was one of the problems from the traumatic brain injury. So if he's kicked out of treatment as a consequence of short-term memory loss and then immediately goes into drug-seeking behavior, it's hard to say those two things are not related, at least in the general sense.
Why has the officer who's been charged not been named? Is this in relation to something of a domestic nature?
No. Because the officer was on duty in the execution of his duties, we've decided not to name him in this incident.
And it's just upsetting, you know? Like, this is the same guy that I filed a complaint against him. The police force knew the evidence, they seen the videos. They didn't do anything to protect the public. And this same guy goes around and beat up somebody in handcuffs again after he did that to me.
Godfred makes a complaint within about a month of the misconduct. So the Calgary Police Service is well aware of what Lindsay did. Anybody would look at this, consider Godfred's complaint, and would know that this is a serious problem. What do they do about Lindsay in the meantime? Nothing. They let him loose on the citizens of Calgary to inflict this damage on Howarth.
I think that until a conclusion was drawn as far as that first incident, he should have just been behind a desk. It seems like it's an egregious error by the management at Calgary Police Service.
You were someone who was holding such an important public office. When charged with a criminal offense, it's not unreasonable for in the public's interest to know who that officer was and who did it. We were one of the few left in the nation that wasn't naming officers. I disagree with that. I believe that we should be aligned with the ideas of full front accountability.
Chaffin goes in We started seeing more officers named, and that was him following through on this transparency and accountability platform. But what that did was really upset the membership. It was a big problem for them, and the police union really picked up on that, and then there was this big tension created between Kaminsky and Chaffin.
The vast majority of our members are absolutely outstanding police officers. If the bad ones get caught and go through the court system, we believe that justice will be served. Good cops.
So they made it clear. I mean, the statements I got early was the intention was to go to war. Primarily the ideas of naming officers, that unless I stopped that practice, they were simply going to try to make life very difficult. And, I was not willing to sell that ideology.
So Les Kaminsky campaigned on the fact that he didn't think police officers who were charged with crimes should be named. He neglected to mention at that time that he was under criminal investigation and would eventually be charged with crimes.
Controversy continues to mar the Calgary Police Force. The newly elected president of the police union has been charged now with perjury and assault.
One officer hits him in the head, and then he's fired into the van head first with such force that his legs go up in the air. Then the door of the van is slammed on his legs. Kaminsky testified that none of that happened. Then the Crown bailed out on prosecuting Kaminsky. I mean, that to me really illustrated that there is some deep-rooted problem in the Crown Prosecution Service.
Calgary Police Sergeant Les Kaminsky left court Monday feeling a huge sense of relief. All criminal charges against him have now been dropped, including one count of perjury.
I mean, this is a guy who knew he was under investigation and still put it out there that he didn't think police officers who were charged with crimes should be named. That seems like a bit of a conflict of interest.
I think the associations still have to keep finding their way in leadership as well. When I talk about the numbers of officers being arrested, there is a voice for them to help prevent those things. As opposed to argue about naming, maybe spend some time working on the issues that lead to misconduct and arrest and see if they can raise their voice to stop that kind of behavior.
I worked for the Calgary Police Service for 14 years. My first day starting in the district, a senior officer came up to me and he said, "So are you a bitch, a slut, or a lesbian?" And I was taken aback by that comment. And I thought, oh, wow, is this what type of environment I'm coming into? We would go out for drinks and wings. I was never a drinker, so I always ordered water. My sergeant pulled me aside and said, "Jen, if you want to fit in with the team, you better start drinking." I thought, okay, great. We would go out and our booze bill would be like a $700 bill. And people wouldn't think twice. Like, I would never drive, but they would be driving home after. That was tough to see because I thought, we're here to enforce the law and we're breaking it.
To me, the issue was, why are so many people being charged? Impaired drivings and domestic assault issues and just a myriad of frauds and different things. The story at the end of the day is that you have this body of people who are upholding law and who took that oath for objectively administer it, and the one group that should never do these things is us. Yet so many officers are getting themselves in a position where they're being charged criminally.
Today, Calgary's mayor, police chief, and police commission stood before reporters and admitted they have got a problem on their hands. They say changes need to be made to cleanse the Calgary Police Service of a toxic culture, one that's been festering for decades.
I'm very, very proud of the women and of the men of the Calgary Police Service. That's why reports like the things that we have heard over the last week or so are so troubling. They're not consistent with the CPS that we know.
It was always said to me, if you want a good long career on this job, keep your mouth shut. So that's why things never change, because if you're that person who speaks out, well, then your career is ruined. You're going to be, what they say, a street cop the rest of your life, or working the front counter. They started saying bad things about me, like, oh, you're a lone wolf, Jen, you're toxic to this unit. All because I was just trying to push a progressive idea that I felt was necessary for officers to have a better work-life balance. And I was beat down at every level for doing it.
I could no longer work for the CPS without facing retaliation or retribution from certain people because of what I stood and fought for. I have been bullied, sexually harassed, degraded, and chastised. The stresses of all this have had a tremendous impact on not only me and my mental and physical health, but also my family. In particular, my husband, a sergeant with the Calgary Police, has been forced to hear the disgusting things people have said about his wife. In my case, I did not leave the Calgary Police Service. The Calgary Police Service left me.
It was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my life. It was a 14-year career that, yes, it had its ups and downs, but I grew to love the job. To read that out to them, and just the look on the executive's face, they just kind of stood there and stared. My kids understood it, and the day I resigned, I went to the school to pick them up, and sorry. The first thing I walk in, and the principal gives me a big hug and says, "We're so proud of you." And I said, "Thank you. I didn't do anything. I just left my job." And they said, "It's what you stood up for."
She's one of 13 people who filed formal complaints against CPS alleging bullying and harassment. The current and former employees include men and women, sworn officers, and civilian members.
We looked away. We looked away for years. And then the spotlight came out and found out it wasn't a happy workplace. People were being treated poorly. People had experienced terrible things. People had awful experiences with sexual harassment, or all sorts of things came to light, and they came to light with volume.
I was hired in what I thought was going to be a very strategic position related to HR reform and culture change, and unfortunately learned very quickly that that was not the way things were going to play out.
They hired Sheila Ball. It sounded like it was going to be great. And she came in, and I talked to so many people outside the police, within the police, that said she's not going to last.
The first meeting that I had with Chief Chaffin, the counsel that I received was, "Sheila, it is impossible for you to succeed in your role because what we've asked you to do is too great. The executive do not want you to succeed, and that they will be very happy that you don't succeed." It was very clear to me about the toxicity of the organization, the fear level, year after year after year of low and declining employee morale scores. And there was no talk about strategy in terms of how are we going to deal with this. I didn't want to call it bullying at the time because I honestly didn't believe that I could be bullied. I've been in some really tough environments, working in the patch in Houston, working in a refinery between Houston and Galveston with all men in clan country. That's a challenging environment. And so I really understand now, because I don't think I've ever been bullied in my career. And all I could think of every day is, if I am feeling this bad, if I'm feeling embarrassed, or I'm feeling humiliated by some of the things that were happening to me, I can't even imagine, some of the things that had filtered up to me that were going on. I had some authority, I thought, and some power given where I was placed within the organization, and it still happened to me. And I wasn't putting up with it. I was being excluded. So really, what was the point of me being there?
Reforming HR is an issue that continues to come up at police commission meetings, and it did again Tuesday with the news the Chief Human Services Officer resigned after only months on the job.
It was unfair to put that on her. She had a very important job to do, but you couldn't wear the moniker of culture reform by yourself. There's no way. That would be a monumental task for one person to do.
Police Chief Roger Chaffin is calling it quits just 3 years into his 5-year contract. He's dealt with some major issues during his time, including harassment and bullying in the force and a spike in police shootings.
He got so much done in the face of a lot of opposition from the old guard, from people who prefer to have an old school police service that operates in the corners and not in public openly and transparently.
I did tell them when I started that I will not be very popular for doing the things I'm going to do, but they must get done. And I'm hopeful I've worn a lot of that the next chief or the next management doesn't have to redo it again. They don't have to go back and revisit some of these painful issues. The test will be, what does this look like in a year or two? Was it all for naught, or did we keep moving forward?
Trial is underway for a Calgary police officer charged with aggravated assault. The Crown prosecutor says a 2015 arrest by Constable Trevor Lindsay left a man with a fractured skull and a brain bleed.
His family say Howarth was not the same after that arrest and the injuries that he suffered on that day. This is a 7-day trial and it is being heard by judge alone.
In order to avoid a conflict of interest or even the appearance of a conflict, they have brought in prosecutors from Edmonton as well as an Edmonton judge, not knowing who Constable Lindsay might have come into contact with in his capacity as a Calgary police officer.
From a lawyer's perspective, it didn't seem like anything that Daniel did on that video warranted 3 successive punches and being thrown straight to the ground. Of course, he can't put his hands in front of him to save himself from the fall. He's not assisted in any way by the officer from striking the ground, and then he does. And it appears he goes headfirst right into the pavement, and he doesn't move after that.
11:17. You just had to recall that our male staff let at us. We're code 15, but he's going to need EMS in a bad way.
10-4. After he throws Danny to the ground, you see him walking around, and he is obviously agitated. I imagine in his mind he's saying, how am I going to get myself out of this one? So I'm going to close this door, take these photos. Here comes the sergeant. I want him to see that I'm worried that I have this guy's blood on me. My opinion of all of this is obviously, one-sided. Like, this is my brother, but there are things that are right there that make him look extremely guilty, I think.
I was pretty angry, like the first time I walked inside the courtroom, watching this guy just lying, and he thinks he can get away with it. He's sitting there like he didn't do anything wrong. And I'm sitting there having flashbacks and PTSD. It was pretty hard to watch. You don't put people in handcuffs and beat them up and assault them. That's not right.
Lindsay described Howarth as combative and argumentative. And then after that first punch that he delivers to Howarth, he describes Howarth as sort of twisting to spit, at least in his direction, and fearing that that spit was mixed with blood. He said he was terrified that he was going to contract some kind of disease.
If there was spitting, it certainly could not have been in the direction of the officer from the angles visible on the video. So if he was spitting, it would have been in the direction of the car or the pavement somewhere.
So under cross-examination, Trevor Lindsay talked about the notes that he wrote following this incident. So he took incredibly detailed notes, 19 pages of notes. But in those notes, he never mentions those 3 punches that we can see on the video right before that takedown.
Sitting in trial was really hard for my mom. That definitely affected me. He was very nonchalant and smiling and making jokes, and all of that did really, really get under my skin. Going into trial, there were times before that I was like thinking that I might go in there and I might hear something in there that might justify what he did. Like, I was trying to leave my mind open to the truth of the matter. And after sitting in trial, the truth of the matter is that that guy just snapped and hurt my brother. And he doesn't show a single sign of remorse. Like, he obviously, it doesn't seem like he thinks he did anything wrong.
This is going to be Lindsay's 6th hearing, I believe. I don't know what's going to happen, but hopefully some good news. They sent my file to the main prosecutor's office, and they decided not to lay no charges on Lindsay because they said it's not enough evidence. But there was enough evidence in Hayward's video, right? Like, and what do you see in that video that you don't see in my video? We both in handcuffs getting assaulted, so the fact that they don't charge him in my case is just ridiculous, man. Racism at its finest, you know. This hearing was just a joke. It's a waste of taxpayers' money. It's a waste of my time and everybody's time that came there. It's a joke. It's like the same thing they said from November. They postponed it, what, 6, 7 months after? And they come back today, same thing. You see, this is why he went and assaulted another guy. Because you file complaints, they don't take it serious. It's just frustrating, like not being able to work, financially not stable, family members calling you from back home, asking for, financial help, my moms and sisters and cousins and, and it hurts, to not be able to help them out. Like, it's very frustrating. Shiva, let's go. Come here.
It's been more than 5 years and the investigation's not done. So they will prosecute at the drop of a hat somebody who is alleged to have committed an offense against a police officer. And they will carry that right on, just like they did in Godfred's case. Yet it should have been plain as day that there were police officers who should have been charged. Godfred's case clearly illustrates the double standard in that regard. Unfortunately, that's the way it is in a lot of cases.
You know, it wasn't planned. We were driving and I said to my husband, there's the hotel right there. I went in and I asked if I could see the room. I had the guy from the front desk stand on the other side and you couldn't see anything the way that the room is designed. I knew that they were lying. I remember like leaving and just calling my parents right away. And I was like, I was just at the hotel room and you can't see anything. I mean, that's the story. The story is that he could see Anthony pacing back and forth and seeming agitated. And that's why he called for backup.
It's an impossibility. You cannot see in the room. And as far as you know, it's Officer McLaughlin. That's the only one that said he could see Anthony in the room. So he's lying. He's lying about it.
And in 72 seconds after they enter the room, our son is dead.
There's the... where the bullet will have gone through.
Oh my God.
It seems to, he collapsed this here, I guess. Unbelievable how you could have five officers.
Heavily armed officers in this room. There's nowhere to go.
No.
And if in fact he was holding a syringe, they can't see that it didn't have a needle tip.
And as if he did have something in his hand, as if they could knock it out of the baton or something. Anything, if he's standing there and being like, what is this?
Oh my God, I can't believe what Anthony must have gone through. Like, oh, the terror, oh.
And then to have shot into the floor. Bullets again were into the floor by Anthony's head, so he had to definitely shoot at Anthony when he was down and dead on the floor, because they said all of the bullets were fatal. It didn't take 4 bullets to kill him, the first bullet killed him.
Oh.
So then just to keep on shooting,
yeah,
it's so cowardly.
You know, it's unbelievable that Eric Tolpanen could have the audacity to say that excessive force wasn't used, that the force used was necessary.
Well, Eric Tolpanen should come up here and take a look around the room, and maybe he could see it's not reasonable that what the judgment he came out that they could not prosecute. It's all over for Anthony Heffernan. People have to be held responsible for their actions.
Oh,
There's no way Anthony should be dead.
No, no.
Well, Calgary Police Service, they were flying under the radar with all of the misconduct happening within their ranks, but now they've been caught, and they've been caught in very public ways. And so the chickens have come home to roost for the Calgary Police Service. All of these things, all of these terrible crimes being committed by their officers is a symptom of them not doing something about it 10, 15, 20 years ago.
When it comes to picking a new police chief, people are looking at whether it's going to be internal or external. They need somebody who's not sort of politically connected to either side to come in and shake things up.
Mark Neufeld has been sworn in as Calgary's new police chief. Neufeld takes charge at a time when the force is plagued by accusations of bullying and sexual harassment. He pledged to make respect a cornerstone of policing.
There's been a lot of assumption that because he's from outside the organization, he will be the silver bullet to all our problems, or the magic pill to all problems. I think that's unfair. So to put so much on him is unrealistic.
I think you have to be really careful, especially as a new chief coming into an organization. I think we have great people. And again, I think we have some people, as every organization does, who are not adhering to the values and who don't represent us the way we would hope. And I think that's a personal affront to a lot of our good employees as well.
For serious misconduct, you have to have punishment. There has to be consequences so that other like-minded officers will be deterred from behaving that way. And so that it shows that the leadership of the police service is an ethical one, and they won't stand for it.
I think for too long, organizations have done this where when something goes wrong, they hang out an individual to dry, and then they say, well, there we go, we dealt with that. Bob was bad, and we dealt with Bob, and now we're good. But I think, this bad apples versus bad barrel is they're very different things. And I think we've always got to be looking at the barrel to make sure it's not the barrel that is actually tainting the apples. We do see an uptick in use of.
So I would put a lot of confidence that he's the right kind of person, but what's everybody else going to do? That's really the question. Where's everybody else going to be in this picture and around the idea of reforms? People are going to have to let go of the past and start looking at what do we need to do to create a more vibrant, more positive organization, and I hope they give him the chance to do that.
Just because he's got a uniform and a badge and a gun don't mean he can go around beating people in handcuffs. Nah, it's not acceptable, man.
So the judge read portions from his 30-page written decision, and essentially he found that Haworth, after he had been initially punched in the face, had the need to spit blood. He had it collected in his mouth, and in fact, he had spat blood towards the back of the police car, so nowhere near the officers. The judge also found that Lindsay could have controlled the situation by simply keeping Haworth pressed up against his police cruiser, that he had control of that handcuffed suspect. And it was only in the moments where he was hauling Haworth away from the police car that things sort of got out of control, and that's when the punching occurred. Essentially, the judge found that none of the use of force was justified, and so Constable Trevor Lindsay was found guilty of aggravated assault.
Both my client and I are disappointed at the outcome. We have taken the time to conduct a preliminary review, a very preliminary review of the judgment. I expect I will be receiving instructions to appeal.
I'm happy to see justice served, and I'm glad with the judge's decision. The last time we were in court, I saw Howard's mom crying. It really got to me, here is this poor lady, losing his son. And I think if they had done something about it when I filed the complaint, maybe Howard would still be alive,
Not every cop is going out there hurting people. There's cops out there that are giving addicts, like my brother, mouth-to-mouth resuscitation and rushing them to the hospital to try and save their life, right? Police officers, I think, need to still be held accountable for their actions. Yes, they have a hard job. Not everyone can do their job, but that doesn't give them an excuse to abuse their power.
Hopefully one day all this will be over and can take a trip back and go see the family and, just relax, enjoy some good food and just enjoy my country, But yeah, hopefully one day soon I'll be going back. I still get like serious anxieties when I see cops. I get this anger, But then again, not all cops are bad cops, right? But in my eyes, they're all the same because in my situation, there was like how many cops involved and nobody did the right thing. So where's the good one?
It's hard to explain to my son that his grandfather was a police officer. Don't be scared of cops. They're there to protect you, right? Because when he first saw the video, he came to me absolutely destroyed, right? This is his uncle that he loved. He was terrified that it was going to happen to him. He was asking me, well, what if I get arrested? Am I going to get beat up? Which is sad. And of course, I'm not going to say anything negative about the police to my son because I want him to be able to feel confident calling the police if he's in trouble, not scared to call them.
I don't think the same way that I used to. I mean, our family was called by so many other families who have had family members beaten or killed by the police. And, the stories aren't always the same, but what was the same is that it shouldn't have happened. It didn't have to happen. So I don't inherently trust in our legal system at all anymore.
It was so traumatic. It was so traumatic for all of us. Oh my goodness. And it has affected, our kids as well. in all sorts of different ways.
People often say, how are things going, whatever, and they hate to bring it up. And we'll say it's always with us. Never worry about that. It's always with us. Usually the first thing I think of when I wake up, and it's always the last thing I think about when I go to sleep at night. Injustice is an awful thing.
And we begin tonight with the bird's eye view of Calgary as marchers make their way to City Hall. This shot giving you a real sense of just how many Calgarians came out today to take part in this demonstration.
My name is Godfred Addai. I was beat up by the police 6.5 years ago. I was kidnapped, put in handcuffs, tasered 3 fucking times, and they beat the shit out of me. I'm here to fight for justice for black people, and I know Black Lives Matter. That's why we are here. What happened to George was very sad, but we got our own issues out here in Calgary, in this province, in this country. The message I'm trying to get across is we don't want no police brutality. We don't want no systemic racism. We want equality. We want freedom. And we want justice. Yeah. Black Lives Matter!
To see all these people come together, fighting against injustice, racism, police brutality is beautiful, man. It's beautiful, and I'm so glad to be a part of it. Change is coming soon, people. Hold on, change is coming soon. Stay strong, stay together,
and keep fighting.